Well, it's Monday again, and I'm happy to say that Pat McGard is sitting in his well-lined room with just waiting for us to zoom our way up to Donegal. How are you, Pat?
Grand, Jude, we're in lockdown, or well, they don't call it lockdown, but our freedoms are curtailed somewhat as we speak.
You're the most infected county in Ireland, aren't you?
Yeah, it's unbelievable. But Jude, I actually said on Saturday, I went past a house in Donegal, and I'll not say where, but there was 8. Now this is a lockdown, and we have the biggest, I think, was something like 256 or something, way ahead of Dublin and so on. And the rules were that you're not supposed to have more than 6 people from another family and all. I went past the house in Donegal, and I was driving, but I counted as I was driving past 8 cars in a driveway. There was a big inflatable of some kind, a bouncy castle, and God knows how many people were inside. So there were people, despite the absolute carnage of this COVID thing, just totally, completely and utterly disobeying the rules. And then people wonder why lockdowns come into play.
You get to the stage you very soon begin to think, just have to enforce these things. It's like seatbelts, everybody knows it's a good idea. But if there wasn't somebody or speeding, if there wasn't somebody there to penalise, if you did it or were caught.
No, but the one thing I find amazing that there's this cohort of people out there, and they seem to be growing, who say this is not a serious thing, including one prominent member of the medical profession that I know. But anyway, Dr. Gabriel Scally was on this morning. He's the head of the British Medical Association, even though he's an Irishman. And he says this is a very serious virus, and the long-term effects of it will not be known for years to come, until years come by this way. So, how can people turn around and sort of dismiss it, as a light flu or whatever?
Well, I think they're fearful, you see, of the fact that it's the government really has got people under control, and we're not used to that to quite this extent. And in a way, you would say this is like a police state. They're telling you when to stay at home, when to come out, and all the rest of it. And if you forget the fact that they're doing that because they want to save us from dying, then you could get very irate and say, where are our civil rights and so on. But I suppose the young people particularly want to be out, and they use the fact that they want to be out. They use the excuse of, give us our civil rights. So did you see the number of people? Was it in Dublin? Or was it in London? Thousands of people demonstrating against the police and saying, we demand.
Well, Jude, there was a demonstration arranged for Letterkenny on Saturday at short notice. I think about 10 people showed up. It was held in the Market Square, and there's statues there, and somebody said there was more statues than people there. Thanks be to God.
Thanks be to God, indeed. Yeah. Okay, Pat, well, we get down to business here.
Yes, go for it.
We've got 3 topics for today, and the first one of them is emigration, which I think was sparked in your mind because you passed through a particular area in Donegal, which has a story behind it. Do you want to tell us about that?
Jude, yesterday, you can stay now within your own county, so rather than sit here and watch the world go by, myself and my dear missus went out for a drive yesterday, and there's this place, and my Irish is not great, but a rough translation, it's a place called the Bridge of Tears, and it's outside of Fulcara. And basically, people from West Donegal, they walk with their children as far as this bridge, and then and it goes over a mountain, sort of asking up the mountain. They went as far as there. The children went on their own, or the child went on his own. The parents and the siblings turned and went back to their homes. And it's called the Bridge of Tears because that's where the parting was. And Jude, the thought occurred to me, you stand there, and there's high ground all around you, and it's actually very moving in a sense when it starts playing in your head. How many people here? So now it's not sort of poignancy for the sake of it or nostalgia for the sake of it. It just, the thought occurs to you, and emigration is such a part of our history and all. But the thought occurred to me, see what those people went through. When they saw their children going over that hill, the chances are that was the last time they would ever see that child. Yeah. So that was really traumatic and stress. And we had one of the highest rates of mental illness and the world. That's glossed over. There's massive depression in this country. When you think of all that, the part all that played, and our history and all the rest, and I sat and watched that yesterday, and I thought, God, wait a minute, see now, I can talk to you through Zoom, I can talk to you through Skype. There are kids in America assuming their mothers and fathers. So, know that fear, that jagged edge in your heart that emigration used to, is that still the case?
Well,
That's really what came into my head yesterday.
there's certainly you don't have the thing like when they went from the Bridge of Tears or whatever, or any other part of Ireland, say back 50 years ago or more. Then that was it. That was it. You know, you talked about what was it, the emigrant wake,
Yeah,
where you'd never see them again, and that
yeah,
must have been absolutely heartrending. But don't forget, even then they were going. Why were they going? They were going because they would get a better life. That was
yeah,
the idea of going.
yeah,
So
yeah,
the parents and I suppose the siblings too, their hearts must have been torn. One, that they're
yeah,
never going to see their child again, but
yeah,
two, hoping and maybe even knowing that the child will have a better life than they have
yeah,
what they are now.
yeah, yeah,
So it's always a difficult one. That well, I was lived, as you know, in Canada for 10 years, and I always had that sort of pull. You know, part of me realized, look, this is good. I have a good job, and I get paid a lot more money here, and the weather's not bad. It's a terrible winter, but bloody good summer and spring and autumn.
yeah,
And you know, things are cheaper here, and it's just a lot of good things. But there's always this sort of longing and thinking back to what it was like at home, and you
yeah,
know, never feeling quite at home. Um,
yeah,
the other thing is this: you see, if you take your children, they're grown up, but they're living, most of them, within striking distance of you.
yeah,
We've got 4 children, and none of them lives within striking distance. Like one of them lives in the States, and 3 of them live in London. Now we
yeah,
can get in contact with them, lift the phone just, but more frequently we'll do Skype or something like that.
yeah, yeah,
And you have great closeness that way, and we're regularly in touch. So it's as if I'm talking to them in Brooklyn or wherever, and it's as if they were in the next room. But at
yeah,
the same time, you know, I envy you and people like you whose children are close, whose grandchildren are close, and assuming that COVID will one day go away, that you can see them and you can just sort of interact with them and
yeah.
want them to be there. But see, that's dangerous too, because what you're doing is,
What do you mean by that? What do
well,
you
I
mean by
mean,
that?
it's dangerous because the real reason, if it was me, the real reason I want them to be near me is not for their sake, for my sake. You
Yeah.
know, the fact
What's
that,
wrong with that?
well, the fact is, it's their life. If they want to be here, fine. If they want to be somewhere else, fine. And don't forget, a lot of people quite like being abroad. Like
Yeah,
I did an interview with a guy for this publication we're planning, and he was in San Francisco and he spent his life there. And I asked him, "Wait, are you sorry you didn't actually settle in Ireland?" He said, "No, no." He said, "I'll tell you the truth. I think if I'd stayed in Ireland, and he could have got a teaching job in Ireland." He said, "I
mm,
think I'd probably either have suffered from depression or I would have
yeah,
taken a drink. I
yeah,
just had a feeling that the world had opened out more for me." And, you know, I can kind of understand that too.
yeah. Jude, you see, the first day I was in my journalistic career started with a paper called the Dairy People in Donegal News in Letterkenny way back in 1974. And the sort of guy who was in charge, a man called Sean Corn. First day, he says, "Here, may as well get used to it." Right, there's an obituary. And there's a woman, I've always remembered the name. Her name was Nappy, Nappie, or Nappy, McFadden from Gweedore, who emigrated to America in the 1920s. And whatever it was, she was 17 or something. And she emigrated there and she never came back. Now, I was thinking, imagine in maybe 1919, 1920, whatever it was. I can't remember exactly, but it was way back at the start of the century. And she never came home again. So she left West Donegal. So the chances are she didn't speak English. She left where the sun and the sea and the stars all met, you know, on a rugged west coast of Ireland, to a teeming metropolis and all. What was her life like? What was the you know? And I know, you know, I've always remembered her, and I would love to know. And if I ever got a chance, I'll never do it because I'm, you know, one of these people think these things, but never do them. Like, whatever happened to her family? I would love to know. No, she's probably a great grandson's there. Now they could be university professors, or they could be lying in the street. But it'll be fabulous to find out what was the trail that followed her. But I remember one of the reasons I remember that was because it was the first day at work, and that was the first thing I did that day.
Yeah, I think I can understand, you think about these things and you wonder what's like, and sort of they're lost to Ireland, they sort of
Yeah.
swallowed up by this big anonymous country like America. I think there's some truth in that, but there's another part of it. Like, for example, I've just sent an email, before we start talking here, I sent an email to a woman that I know, known for ages. She was a friend of Morons. And they've lived in Canada all their days. In fact, they tried to settle here and they couldn't come back again. They're both Irish, but they couldn't settle here. And they're back in Canada. And they, I'm certain, believe that their lives were far richer where they were in Canada than if they come back here. I come back here and I'm glad I come back.
Yeah.
But I can see the other side possibility too, that they feel, look, it's a broader life. It's not as sort of, what would you call it, parochial in a way. Like, in Ireland, my father used to, anybody come into the house, my father used to say, what's your name? And they say the name and say, well, who are you now? And the guy would say, well, I'm so-and-so. And I say, who are you? And he kept going until he got somebody that he knew that, would link him with this guy.
That's exactly what my mother would have done. And she could have told you the seed breeding generation of the person after, after about 5 minutes. Because
but you see, that's nice and nice sense of interconnectedness. But it's also bloody, it can be pretty crippling too. Because what happens if the person makes a link with you, with somebody in your family or some distant relative, and they don't like that person?
He was a horse stealer or a punching maker or whatever.
Exactly. That's the other
but you know what? Yesterday, there was 2 or 3 people stopped at that bridge and they were taking photographs. And you know what's going through your head? You said, wait a minute, years ago, this was, a sharp pain for so many people. And what I thought about, now it's a photographic opportunity for a lot of people, and how much has changed. But then it's not that simple. You have 4 kids away. I bet you there's days you would love to see your kids sitting around you.
Of course, I would. Of course, I would. Every day I would like to see them around me, but it's their life. When I went to Canada for the first time, my sister later told me that my mother was sort of distraught. She said, "He's going to go to Canada, and what am I going to do?" And my sister said, "Let him go, let him go." And as it happened, I came back. But anyway. It is the person's own life, and sometimes it's like birds from the nest. You've got to let them go, And if they choose to settle down the road, that's great. But if they don't choose to settle down the road, you've got to accept that. I mean,
that's reality.
What's the alternative to that? You're going to say, look, you come back. I really want you. It'd be nice for you to be here. You're living your life for your parents.
Yeah, but that's the thing about living on an island, Jude.
That's what was it? Yeats said, great hatred, little room.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Okay. And the second topic we were going to talk about was relocating. Yeah, you're very aware of this, Pat, because
this morning in RT, the reason I'm saying, we mentioned this some time ago, but there was a woman on, I can't remember her name now, she was on Claire Byrne's show this morning, and she said on Friday on Carlo, there was an auction of 20 show houses, and this woman said there were people rocked up with blankets and flasks of tea and all to stay outside they got there early. Now, I think you were asking before, what are going to be the outworking of COVID? I think there's going to be a lot of changes, particularly on this working from home thing and about people move. Dublin, there's 1.2 million people living in Dublin. I think 1.5 million living within whatever it is, 10 miles of it, something like that, maybe even more. And the whole republic has got, it's all shifted to the east. So wonder the landmass hasn't done a seesaw because so many people have cleared over. But this COVID could change so many things. Now, Jude, things like international travel, working from home, I can't even think of what other things. But these are the things that are now starting to change, about how we have, and they are all, this whole thing about our interconnectedness, Zoom, Skype, all these things are now changing. And like, what's going to be the final when, say, COVID disappears within the next year? What will we have learned? So I was thinking to myself, like, if Carlo, a small place like Carlo, is getting a queue outside an auctioneer's door for 20 houses, what's going to be the I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm just saying it's significant, but what is the significance?
Well, I think it's maybe a change. Do you think, Pat, it's a change from in the old days where people were attracted to cities because that's where the work was. Now, as you
Sure,
say,
look at
now,
France. Look at France, Jude. France is empty, and the big cities are overrun. But go ahead, sorry, Jude.
I'm just saying that they came to the big cities because that's where the work was. Now, you know, the Falls Road and the same thing in Derry from Donegal and so on. But when the work doesn't reside there anymore, as you say, when people can work in other places and still do the thing just as well through technology, why would they come to the big cities? I think the difficulty, I think with time, if the technology keeps on improving, I think there'll be more and more people will be living further and further away from these big conurbations. But at the same time, I think the people who suffer will be the people who have, say, for half their life, have spent it in or around, say, Dublin. And now they're told they can work from home. And they start to get the idea, well, of course I could move such and such a place, Donegal or wherever, Mayo, wherever's Kerry, and I could have lovely scenery, and I could get a house twice as good as this one, and so on. But you have to remember the word roots. People put down roots.
Yeah.
And for better or worse, when you pull those roots up, especially if they've gone down for half a lifetime, you know, they're a bit raw, and it's hard to get them put somewhere else. Even though you mightn't think the place you're in is the best place in the world, it's the place you know. And you're always going to feel something of an outsider if you go somewhere else. You think?
Yeah, it's like a lot, back to that immigration. I knew a couple who emigrated to America, and they were never quite happy here, but they were never quite happy there. It's sort of roots in both places. You know, now their children are totally American, but you know, that sort of thing. So I don't suppose you can live half your life in Dublin and then suddenly decide to come back here. And maybe then, like, if you come back to rural Donegal, you're not part of the big health service. There's no universities here. There are no motorways. There are no railways. You know, we have plenty of beaches and clean air. So, but you work these things out.
Well, the traditional thing was, that the returned immigrant who, wanted to come back and spend the rest of their days in the place that their ancestors came from, or they themselves came from.
Yeah.
Actually, in practice, that rarely worked out, I think.
Yeah.
And in fact, if you think about it, you get a lot of Americans who come to Donegal or Tyrone or wherever they're from, their grandparents or whatever were from, and they'll eulogize and they say, "Oh God, what a lovely place!" And I feel the thrill of belonging.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they get the plane out and go home.
3 weeks of bad weather in Donegal and they're away.
Well, you see, that's the thing. You get a lot of people, like I know Benedict Kiley, for example, the writer, was from Oma. And an awful lot of his books talk about Oma. And anytime he was on the radio or the TV, he would talk about Oma with great fun.
I remember that well, yeah.
But he didn't live in Oma. Like, he lived in Oma growing up. But once he was an adult, he went off. And when he could have got back to him if he wanted to, he didn't, obviously, particularly.
No.
So I sometimes think, in a way, people over-talk their affection for some, more rural place. But anyway,
sure, look at Joyce, Jude.
Yeah, that's right. He sort of hated Ireland, like he
wrote about it all the time, but he never loved here.
That's right. It's a different matter when you're writing about it at the same distance. I'll tell you something, Pat. But I spent 2 years in England studying, and with 2 kids at that stage. Maureen was there, my wife, and there were times when we thought, this is almost ideal. We weren't living in Canada anymore, which was a vast, sort of a different, distance away. And at the same time, we weren't living at home where everybody was around you and I had 7 siblings telling me what to do. We had a degree of freedom. It was a sort of a semi-detached thing. And I think we quite liked it. I'll give you one instance just and we'll stop then. And that was, we stayed there 2 Christmases. And the first Christmas we came back to Belfast and had Christmas dinner and stayed for a few days with my sister in Belfast. And the second Christmas, we decided, no, I'm not bothered, we'll just stay here. Yeah. And we had a far, far better Christmas.
Yeah.
Just with ourselves and our kids. And not all that.
A lot less stress.
Yeah, and you didn't feel this sense of duty and I've got to go over. And, So you don't need to dismiss the fact that people find great satisfaction in ways of living outside Ireland, as well
Yeah.
as people find great satisfaction
Fraction.
in Ireland, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think there's money to be made in this pack. You know, I think, for example, if what you're suggesting is true, and you have lots of people who are moving out of Dublin and setting up, you know, in places like Waterford or wherever, I think there's money to be made by it. You could get somebody who would organize sort of social getting together, social support for Jackies, you know, who feel exiled, you know. I'm telling you, you could really love coming together and say, oh yeah, we should back and, you know,
a support group for Jack Haynes.
Black Rock, you know, or something like that. I think in a way they will feel as exiled as they do, you know, if they were in America. Anyway, the third one, and I think this is the really interesting one, Pat. You had an experience. I'm tempted to say you had a religious experience. Tell us about it.
Jude, I came across a thing the other day, yesterday actually, about Jesus Christ, about what they had, you know, he had no degrees yet they called him teacher, and he had no army yet they called him, you know, whatever, and all this sort of stuff, and he changed the world. And I thought it was a beautiful thing actually, really genuinely, because what Jesus preached, I totally believe in, and I actually shared it. Now, normally I would get 40, 50, 60 shares or likes, or I think I got 2 people. One of them was slagging me. Now, totally entitled, he slag, whatever. But I actually responded, look, I am not ramming this down anybody's throat. This is what I actually like and believe in. And I actually just want to pass it on because there was something, as far as I'm concerned, actually quite beautiful about it. But, you know, I thought to myself, see, are we living in a post-religious age? Because I notice now nobody wants to, if you share anything religious now, nobody wants to come in and back you up or support you or anything like that. And I have no problem with that, but sorry, what did you say?
I was going to say, why do you think that is?
Because it's almost now, religion is almost seen as superstition, that it's now, you know, that it doesn't exist in it. Where, no, what is who was it said that it's the opium, or the opium of the people, or the opiate of the people? And, you know, like this was all what our ignorant great grandparents all believed in. It was like, you know, it's a fairy story, and it's, you know, it's superstition, and it's, you know, based on a whole, like, about people who never existed, and a religion that doesn't exist, and like if half the world believes in this God and the other half are going to hell because they believe in another God, all this sort of stuff. Jude, you know as well as I do, you had brothers, priests, and all. So, but I thought it was amazing that the sort of the silence first of all, and then the wee bit of slagging as well. You know, that to me it was a massive change in attitude in Ireland. And you know, I think most people didn't come in because even though maybe quite a few agreed with me, they would be embarrassed to be seen to be supporting it. And I thought, you know, that's where we're at.
Well, I think you've got a lot of support there. I would agree with you completely. And I think I remember Padre Tobin. Now, you might say Padre Tobin's a sort of a right-wing Republican, but I remember him saying, and I think it's absolutely true, he said, you know, today people are almost afraid to say that they go to Mass, you know, because people will say, oh, geez, what kind of this living in the dark ages or what, you know? So we really, I think Ireland as a society has lurched from one extreme to the other. You know, when I was young, there was no doubt about it, like that the church told you what to do and told you what was right and what was wrong, and you did it. And if you didn't, you felt guilty. Not only were you afraid of being caught, but you felt really guilty that you hadn't done what the church had told you. We've now lurched to the other extreme, I think. And we're saying, you know, for God's sake, if you have anything to do with those guys, they're all a bunch of pedophiles. You know, and the facts of the matter just contradict that. You know, we know that there are priests and brothers and so on who are pedophiles, but there are also dentists and journalists and royalty that were pedophiles as well. I just, it's sort of sad in a way, because if somebody said to me that they had abandoned their Catholic faith, I might feel a bit saddened about that, because I try to cling on to my Catholic faith. I might feel a wee bit saddened, but I wouldn't say to them, you bloody idiot, you know, what sort of rubbish you believe in now? I would accept the fact that's their right if they want to do that. How come that, as you say, how come when you even mention the idea that Jesus might have had a point on some area of life, that people shy away in case they're thought of as backwoodsmen or something.
Yeah. Jude, I think it was you might have mentioned it to me some time back. Bishop Daly said those who denied the existence of God had a harder job. Because, Jude, there's so much about, like, I am open to this. I am more of an agnostic than an atheist. And I sincerely hope there's a God. I really genuinely do. But there's so much in this world that we can't explain. There's universes out there. There's God knows what's out there that we don't know anything about, and so on. So those who try to ram down your throat that there isn't a God, I find is offensive as those who say there's a God if they try and ram you down your throat. I think most people should be left to believe, and if you believe in Jesus Christ and God, please be my guest. I think it's actually a wonderful thing that you believe, and I would love to have the faith. But I'm hopefully before I pass this mortal coil that I will have that faith. I would love to. Like, I know the old people got great comfort of it, and someone I am not. I actually quite sort of resent the fact that those people were sneered at. They're not to be sneered at. They had their beliefs, whether they're right or wrong. It brought them great comfort, and maybe at the end of it, maybe they're right.
Well, as I say, I would be polite to people who are of a different view, but at the same time, I could share my thoughts with you. I think there's a terrible arrogance in saying there is no God, because like we don't know, we don't rightly know the moon yet. That's the nearest planet to us, and then there's all that universes out there, and what happens at the end of the universe, and are there alternative universes? And they say that the universe is twisting and turning and stretching, and I mean, we're just
when we understand all that, Jude, then you can tell me definitely there's no God.
Decision. But here we are just tiny little flies clinging to this rock that's hurtling through space at 186,000 miles an hour and spinning in the most elaborate patterns. So we get day and night, and then we get the seasons and so on. I mean, it's just mind-blowing. And yet, there are people, I remember actually, I'll stop on this. I remember when I was a young man having an interview with Brian Friel, and I said to him, "Why do you write?" And he sort of said, "Well, next question." But he said before that, he said, "Well," he says, "I suppose I'm like one of many ants on the end of a blade of grass. There's a field, and the field's full of grass, and in every blade there's an ant, and that ant is shouting, the way I can tell you how it is. I can see it from here. They think that their perspective is the only one, and they refuse to acknowledge the fact that there's lots of others who could be a totally different view on the thing."
Yeah, exactly. So, but that the day that somebody can give me a definitive, there's a God or there isn't a God, grant, I'll blame. But the intolerance, there's the snobbery of intolerance, and then there's people are entitled to their beliefs. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. There was I said it. I'll give you this one. There was a guy I was talking to in Canada about religion, and a very lovely guy, and he was saying, "I will know. I wouldn't. I don't take things on faith. I like to deal in facts."
Yeah.
And I said to him, I may have told you this, but I said to him, "Well, would you have faith that now that the traffic lights are green, it's okay to drive through?" Because you are taking that in faith, you're taking it on faith that there will be a guy in a truck that's
coming the other way,
cream you, And the same right throughout your life, like from eating a can of beans, you're a faith that's gonna not poison you. And in any case, the idea of being bound, tied by just facts, scientific facts, that seems to be a failure of imagination. Like you wouldn't have anything like poets. No, you really wouldn't. What's the point of a poet? I mean, sure, he's dealing with stuff that doesn't make sense. I mean,
but there's so much in this world that doesn't make sense, Jude. So therefore, all those questions remain open.
And isn't it wonderful? Aren't we lucky to have them?
Exactly.
Okay, Pat, we've solved
all the best, Jude. Good luck.
Talk to you again.
Good luck.